All right, we're starting our next lesson on permutations. This is a process that we use in order to count the possibilities when order is important. Talking about the order of the possibilities being important. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about a fancy vocabulary word called factorial. So for any positive integer, the product of the integers from 1 to n is called n factorial and is written as n exclamation point. All right, these numbers are really excited, they're going to use exclamation points. Now it's just, that's the that's the punctuation symbol we use. If for any reason you see 0 factorial, its value is going to equal 1, not 0. Fortunately, we don't see too many of those. Let's take a look at an example of when would we use factorials. What does this have to do with anything? Well, it goes back to the idea of, the counting principle. A number of you used this on the exit ticket, talking about how, the combinations using 2 dice. Well, if you roll 1 dice, there's 6 possible outcomes. So if you roll 2 dice, then you have 6 more outcomes, and so your total would be 6 times 6, which is 36 possibilities. All right? That's called the counting principle. Well, the factorial takes the idea of, well, if I am running a race, for example, this one says 10 runners are in a race, assuming there are no ties, and how many orders can the runners finish? Well, if you're running a race, that means you have the 10 places, so on and so forth. Well, 10 people could possibly be the first place winner. Well, once one person crosses the line, that means there are only 9 people left, and so on and so forth. So for each of the additional places, once somebody crosses the line, we have fewer candidates left over for the other places. And then, as the counting principle tells us, we multiply all of those possibilities. So again, as a factorial definition says, it's the product of 1 to n of all of those integers. So we rewrite this to say 10 factorial. Now, good news is, if you know how to break up a factorial into its factors, counting down from whatever the n is all the way to 1, you can put that into your calculator. 10 times 9, times 8, times 7, times 6, so on and so forth. But for those of us with calculators that are a little more scientific and a little more advanced than that, you can use your calculator. If you have a TI-84, I believe the 89 is similar to this, but you'll have to double check. If you hit the math button and then cursor over to the right, all the way to where it says PRB, probability, it gives you a menu. And there are 3 options on that menu that are very important to us. The 4th one being the factorial. And you'll notice that it's the factorial because it has the exclamation point. The other ones that we're going to get to later are permutations and combinations. So with the TI-84, that's how you're going to use it. That's what I did for the rest of the examples, to kind of speed things up without having to work them by hand. Now, if you have the Casio, which most of you do, I wasn't able to find clear instructions, so we'll have to play around with it. But what I could see said something about hitting the option button and then hitting the probability button. And then you should see those images, whether it's the permutation, the combination, or the factorial. And that's usually the order it's written in. So hopefully, to simplify things, finding the factorial is the easiest one. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a lot of stuff by hand, and that can get really time-consuming. All right, so back to the answer. We didn't even finish that. So we have 10 runners. Order is important, so of course, once one person crosses, we run out of people available for the next spots. So we type this into our calculator, either by hand or using the shortcut. And when we do that, we get a value of 3,628,800 combinations. All right? And this is saying the order is important. There are over 3 million different possibilities of that. Pretty impressive. All right, so let's move on to some exercises. Let's move on to some exercises once we actually hit the mouse button. Come on. Oh, goodness. Shortcutting ahead for you. Okay, so pause here. You're going to answer these factorials, typing them into your calculator, however best you want to do it. And then when you're ready, hit play, and I will write down the answers for these exercises. All right, so the answers for question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. Again, as always, make note of the ones you had questions about, and we will talk about them in class. Okay, so how are we going to deal with permutations? It's not just about finding the factors, how many possibilities there are, but it's how many possibilities when I can only take just a small number of those possibilities. So the number of permutations of n objects taken r at a time can be written as npr, so little n, little r, where npr is equal to n factorial over n minus r factorial. Take a moment to write down that formula, and then we're going to take a look at the next slide to show actually how we use this. Okay, so looking at this slide, you have 8 CDs, but you only have a 5-disc CD changer. Yeah, we're going old school. I don't think any of you even own CDs, but in case you do, maybe you'll understand this example. So how many different arrangements of the CDs are possible to put in the CD changer? Okay, so we're worried about the order because we want to play them in a certain order, old school playlist here. But I can only put 5 discs at a time, and I have 8 to choose from. So the way we would write this is I would have 8, right? My C value is equal to 8. I'm sorry, my N value is equal to 8 because that's how many total possibilities there are, but I can only take 5 at a time, so that's my R value. So we write this as 8, big P, 5. Normally your 8 and your 5 are a little bit smaller, but I want you to make sure you can see them. So putting them into the formula, 8 factorial over 8 minus 5 factorial. All right, let's factor that out. Well, let's simplify first. All right, so we have 8 factorial over 3 factorial. And so if I factor this out, oops, I'm running out of room and that thing doesn't like me to touch on it. All right, we can see that there are possibilities for us to cancel out. And so I'm left with basically 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4. Again, use your calculator, plug all that in, you can get an answer. Or, shortcut, the same way we got to our factorial should be the same way we can get to the NPR button. So hit that on your calculator. So again, depending on what calculator you're using, I hit probability, and then I think it was the number 1 to get to NPR, or number 2 or something like that. Usually have to put the number first, then hit the button for NPR, and then hit 5 and then enter. Again, play around with it, it becomes easier with practice. And when we do that, we get 6,720 possibilities. So that is the answer to our question. All right, so take a look at the next examples. Pause to answer them because it's going to take you a few moments to plug all that in. And then when you're ready, hit play. Okay, So the answer is number 5, 30,240. Number 6, 210. Number 7, 6,840. And number 8, 32,760. Circle the ones you have questions about, and we'll answer those in class. All right, let's move on to our last example here for permutations. And since this is our probability unit, let's talk about how we use this in probability. It says you know the first 3 digits of your new friend's phone number, and you also know that the last 4 digits are 0589. In the US, we have 7-digit phone numbers. I believe sometimes we have that here and sometimes we don't. Depends on the phone number. I don't know. Anyways, in the US, we have 7 digits. So you know the first 3, and you know the last 4 is some combination of 0589. But you can't remember the order. So you randomly pick an order from the last 4 digits. What's the probability that you correctly guess the phone number? We all know that when we're dialing a phone number, the order is important. Well, we have 4 possibilities for our last 5 digits. So the factorial is 4 factorial, which equals 24. So what's the probability that we get the right order? Well, there's only one right order out of all those possibilities. So our probability is 1/24. All right. Now let's take a look at our last exercise. So pause here so you can read through the question, and when you're ready, hit play to get the answer. All right, the answer is 1 out of 720. That is the probability that your key will open the post office box. Again, make sure you note any questions you have, and we will talk about them in class.